January is off to a very busy start for the spaceflight industry. This past week alone, we've seen 8 launches from 8 different entities, and we've seen a total of 19 launches since January 1st. There's a lot of big news to talk about this week, including some long-awaited events from NASA, so let's jump right in to this first edition of Spaceflight Weekly. As I'm sure we all expected, we are only 3 weeks into the new year and SpaceX has already been very busy. SpaceX has launched 9 times since January 1st, which, if you do the math, is almost 50% of the launches so far this year. And I know 9 out of 19 launches doesn't sound like a lot, but that number is only going to continue to rise as the year goes on. However, SpaceX was not only the first to launch in the new year, but they were also the first company to launch this past week, and they will be featured first in this episode.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go NRO 105.
On January 16th, SpaceX launched the NROL 105 mission for the National Reconnaissance Office on board a Falcon 9 from Slick 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. This mission sent the 12th batch of satellites for a reconnaissance satellite constellation into low Earth orbit. Per usual with these NRO launches, we don't really know a whole lot about the payload due to its classified nature, but this mission was supported by Falcon 9 booster 1100, which flew for its second time. Following stage separation, the booster performed a boost back burn for an RTLS, or Return to Launch Site, landing at Landing Zone 4 in Vandenberg Space Force Base. That's not all though. The NROL 105 mission also marked a major milestone for SpaceX, being the 600th overall launch for the Falcon 9 rocket. NROL 105 wasn't the only mission to launch on January 16th, however. A very unfortunate turn of events took place over across the pond in China. Now, just a disclaimer before we get into this, we have seen a lot of other content creators get flags and copyright strikes for using footage of Chinese rocket launches, so I will only be using photos and there will be no actual video footage of the rocket launches in this segment. The China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, or CASC for short, launched their Long March 3BE rocket carrying the Shijian 32 satellite into what was supposed to be a geostationary transfer orbit. In classic China fashion, this payload was highly classified and was simply labeled as a multi-role satellite. All seemed to be going well in the flight until the rocket's third stage started its burn to begin the final push into orbit. At some point during the third stage burn, it suffered from an anomaly which prevented the vehicle from successfully placing the Shijian 32 satellite into its designated orbit. Now, there's conflicting information on if the rocket made it into orbit but wasn't like the target orbit, or if it just didn't make it to orbit at all. So the fate of the Shijian 32 satellite still remains unknown. Our second Chinese launch on January 16th that I mentioned was carried out by private company Galactic Energy. This specific launch was the maiden flight of their all-new Ceres 2 rocket, which is a 4-stage rocket designed to have a significantly higher payload capacity than their original Ceres 1 rocket. This rocket was set to carry 6 payloads into low Earth orbit, one of which being the Lilac 3 satellite, which is an ultra-flat disk satellite that was developed by the Harbin Institute of Technology. Shortly after liftoff of this demo flight, unfortunately, the first stage booster of Ceres 2 experienced an anomaly, which some sources state caused the vehicle to spin out of control and fall back to the ground. Now, this being the first flight of this rocket, we don't really expect it to go perfectly. We kind of expect things to go wrong with it being a maiden flight. Space is hard. We don't always get it on the first try, you know. But unfortunately, having the failure of the Long March 3BE alongside this failure of the Ceres 2 definitely probably adds some salt to the wound for China. Heading back to Florida for our second of 3 missions that SpaceX launched this week. On January 18th, SpaceX launched the Starlink Group 6-100 mission on board their Falcon 9 from Slick 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Following the typical routine for Starlink launches, this mission carried 29 Starlink V2 mini satellites into a low Earth orbit to increase the total number of Starlink satellites in orbit to just over 9,500. The Falcon 9 booster powering this mission was booster 1080, flying for its 24th time overall, which is pretty insane seeing how many boosters are already well into the 20s range for their total flight time. Following stage separation, booster 1080 successfully guided itself back down for a landing on SpaceX drone ship, a short fall of Gravitas. Now, just a day later following this Falcon 9 launch, we saw another launch from the CASC, this time launching their Long March 12 rocket, carrying 9 internet satellites for the state-owned SatNet constellation, which is designed to be a direct competitor to SpaceX's Starlink. Thankfully, this time, the mission was 100% successful, placing all 9 of those satellites into their target orbit, increasing the total number of the SatNet satellites to 154 out of the 13,000 needed to complete their constellation. On January 22nd, we saw 3 American launches, starting with our third and final SpaceX launch for the week. SpaceX launched the Starlink Group 17-30 mission on board a Falcon 9. This Starlink mission was launched once again from Slick 4E in Vandenberg Space Force Base, marking the second launch from this pad in just 6 days. The Falcon 9 booster powering this flight was booster 1093, flying for its 10th time, and following stage separation, successfully landed downrange on the SpaceX drone ship Of Course I Still Love You. The Falcon 9's second stage then successfully deployed 25 Starlink V2 mini satellites into a polar low Earth orbit. A few hours after the launch of Starlink Group 17-30, Rocket Lab launched their first mission of the year, and their 80th mission overall for Electron. This mission was titled The Cosmos Will See You Now, and was launched into low Earth orbit from their private launch complex in the Maya Peninsula in New Zealand. The payload on board this Electron was 2 telecommunication satellites for the UK-based customer Open Cosmos. These 2 satellites will eventually become part of a much larger constellation meant to complement the Earth observation satellites that Open Cosmos already has in orbit. Now, we are also looking forward to the first flight of Rocket Lab's newest rocket, Neutron. Now, no official dates have been set yet, but some estimates put this maiden flight for Neutron somewhere in the Q2 to Q3 here later this year. Rocket Lab is already well underway testing flight hardware for the Neutron rocket, meaning that if all tests go well, we might see the rocket begin assembly here very soon. And finally, to close out our launches for the past week, just a few more hours after Rocket Lab's launch, Blue Origin launched the NS-38 mission on board their new Shepard rocket from their private launch site in Corn Ranch, Texas. This was the 19th overall crewed mission for New Shepard, sending 6 private astronauts on a suborbital trajectory just above the Kármán line to allow them to see Earth from a perspective that very few have ever seen.
Wow! Look at the Earth! Wow!
Gosh.
Unbelievable! It's black out there.
Look at that.
Oh my God.
Holy cow, there's the ground.
Wow! Look at this. Ay, ay, ay.
Oh my gosh.
It's too fast.
Oh.
Yes.
The NS-38 crew was initially comprised of Jim Hendren, a retired U.S. Air Force colonel and businessman, Tim Drexler, an entrepreneur and pilot, Linda Edwards, a retired obstetrician and gynecologist, Alberto Gutierrez, an entrepreneur and the founder of travel platform Civitatis, Alain Fernandez, an international real estate developer, and also Andrew Yafe, a businessman from Oklahoma. Now, unfortunately, just 2 days before launch, Andrew Yafe came down with some form of illness, which obviously for his privacy was not specified, but because of his illness, he was not able to go on the NS-38 mission. So to fill in his spot, Andrew was replaced by Laura Stiles, who is Blue Origin's Director of Launch Operations for New Shepard. Now do not fret, just because Andrew missed this mission does not mean he's not going to get a chance to fly on New Shepard anymore. He's obviously paid for the seat, and so he will get an opportunity to fly on a future New Shepard mission, which that exact mission has not been specified yet, but we're looking forward to hearing more about when he'll be able to get back on the rocket. Now, while we're on the topic of Blue Origin, we also have some very exciting news regarding the upcoming launch of NG-3, which is the third launch of their New Glenn rocket. Blue Origin recently made an announcement saying that they are targeting no earlier than late February for the launch of their NG-3 mission. A huge milestone in Blue Origin's reusability campaign is going to be achieved on this mission with the reflight of New Glenn booster Never Tell Me the Odds. That's right, after only 2 launches of New Glenn, Blue Origin is already preparing to refly their first booster. The name of this booster, Never Tell Me the Odds, is obviously extremely fitting for this mission because it wasn't only their first booster to successfully land with our drone ship Jacqueline, but it will now be their first booster to launch and hopefully successfully land for a second time on this upcoming mission, NG-3. Alright, that just about wraps up our spaceflight news for this week, but first, we need to talk about some huge news from Cape Canaveral that we've been waiting to hear about since the final Apollo mission took flight in 1972.
7, ignition sequence started. All engines are started. We have ignition. 2, 1, 0. We have a liftoff. We have a liftoff, and it's lighting up the area. It's just like daylight here at Kennedy Space Center as the Saturn V is moving off the pad. It has now cleared the tower.
53 years ago on December 7th, 1972, NASA launched the Apollo 17 mission, which was sadly the last manned mission humanity ever sent to the moon. Due to major budget cuts, NASA was forced to shut down their manned space exploration programs that went beyond low Earth orbit, leaving many ambitious plans for human space exploration on the scrap pile. For a while, it may have been easy to think that humans returning to the moon was no longer a possibility. Well, fast forward to 2026, and we are going. On January 17th, NASA officially rolled out their SLS rocket ahead of the Artemis 2 mission to the moon, which, as of recording this, is slated to launch in early February. 2 of our team members from Launch Heaven, Austin S. and Asher B., were there to document the rollout as it rolled past the NASA press site. The rollout of SLS began around 7:30 a.m. and took nearly 8 hours to travel the 4.2 miles from the vehicle assembly building to its launch site, LC-39B. The crawler transporter that carries the SLS was traveling at an insane 1.5 miles per hour during the entire journey. While the launch window for the Artemis 2 mission opens on February 6th, that date is still not set in stone as NASA has to first perform a wet dress rehearsal on the vehicle, demonstrating every single step of the countdown all the way down to around the last 30 seconds before liftoff. These steps include fueling the entire vehicle with liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen to ensure the fuel tanks have no leaks and are holding the appropriate pressure for launch. This wet dress rehearsal allows NASA to make sure that all of the kinks in the vehicle are worked out and this thing is 100% ready to launch before we actually put people on top of it and send it off to the moon. If all goes to plan, NASA will be launching 3 American astronauts, including the first female astronaut to ever orbit the moon, and also 1 Canadian astronaut on board the SLS rocket for the Artemis 2 mission very soon. Alright, that wraps up this week's episode of Spaceflight Weekly. To send you all off, I'm going to leave you with this clip of the SLS liftoff from the Artemis 1 mission to get you hyped for Artemis 2. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all next time.
The Space Launch System is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. Launch team can no longer recycle the count. Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
All 4 RS-25 engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour. Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket. SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour.